chair that will just teach me not to read instructions properly. Okay, welcome to James Dillon's final seminar for his DCI. It's a momentous occasion, and it's really great to be gathered to celebrate your achievements and to discuss your research and just take that time to engage and listen and learn and be inspired. So thank you, James.
Wonderful.
It's really exciting. I'm Yvonne Miller. I'm the chair of this seminar, and I'm just going to quickly welcome everybody here and acknowledge the supervisory team, Gillian and Carolyn. Yes, Carolyn, brilliant, thank you. And with me is Greg Curran as his fellow checker. This is a QT process whereby we review James's progress and give us a recommendation so that when it goes out for examination, this document is as strong as it can be. So I'm going to hand over to you, James. You've got about 40 minutes. Do you want me to give you
5 minutes would be great.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Professor Miller, and thank you everyone for joining me today for my Doctor of Creative Industries Research Seminar. So I want to start by making sure I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and I also wanted to make sure I thank the panel for joining me on this transformative journey and sharing your collective wisdom and expertise with me. So in starting my seminar, I wanted to make sure that I point out that this is a Doctor of Creative Industries, which is a professional doctorate, which took place here at the Queensland University of Technology, my place of work and practice. And I'd also like to point out that if you'd like to join along, you can use the hashtag #CreativeThirdSpace, and we also have a live online YouTube video audience as well. So it's a professional doctorate, and I use an insider researcher approach in order to do my research. So that means I didn't work separately as a professional and as an academic at different times. It meant I was wearing both caps simultaneously in my place of practice. So having given you an idea of what my research is about, I just want to explain that my theme and focus is about the content production and distribution of creative content in a higher education setting. That's what I do, and that's been my goal. So I'll start by telling you the structure of my presentation. So it's split into 4 sections. First, I'll be talking to you about my context. So my context includes my personal professional practice as well as my creative practice. And the context also includes the global trends and influences impacting global higher education and the university in which I work in. After providing the context, I'll then move on to the research design. In the research design, I'll explain the research question, the objectives, the aims, and the mix of methodologies I selected and used and applied in my research. After explaining the research design, I will then move on and explain the 2 projects in which I applied my practice and gained information. So the first project is about going out into the field and collecting information from industry experts in Australia, synthesizing that data, and then creating a process model which I could then apply in my own practice here at QUT. And after explaining my 2 projects and what I did, I will then summarize my findings and conclusions, which will be presented as a 6-phase creative digital marketing process model, as well as 6 principles of practice as part of a creative third space. All right, so that's the agenda, that's my presentation. We're starting in my context. I work here at the Queensland University of Technology. It's a large, complex, diverse organization. It's got 10,000 students, 50,000 students, 10,000 staff. It is active in industry engagement, communities, teaching, and research. So the reason why I'm pointing out my context is because in looking at the literature review and looking at the issues and problems and challenges that other professionals are having in higher education, the case and the study in which I applied myself was relevant to the literature. So it was a fertile ground in which to test content in a complex environment. So that's the larger context I'm a part of. In terms of my professional practice, there's lots of different ways in which to look at it. So I'm just looking at it from job title alone. In the bottom 3, you can see my first 3 job titles at Creative Industries faculty. The top 2 is the Learning and Teaching Unit. So later on, I moved to a more central organisation within the university. So we can start to see some trends in here and the kinds of work I do. So first of all, we see digital appears 4 times. We've also got communications 4 times, and there's obviously a really great connection there between digital and communications. There's also strategy. So it starts to give an idea of the things that I'm involved with, but it's not the complete picture. So in going about a literature review as part of a Doctor of Creative Industries, I found some really excellent practice that are related to the practice that I work with. So those 3 practices include marketing, communications, and brand practice, digital creative practice, as well as professional third space practice. So those are 3 fields of practice that intersect together in my professional practice that I apply here in my workplace. And together, I suggest in my thesis that they form the university-embedded creative digital marketing practice. So since this is central to my doctorate, we're going to look at some key aspects of each of these fields of practice. First is marketing, communications, and brand practices. Typically, each of those words has their own definitions, practices, techniques, mindsets, and approaches that those practitioners apply in their field. And all of them can be applied in my role. This area is heating up globally because of increased market competition between universities, and there's increasing investment going into it. The literature review showed how sophisticated this area is becoming. You're able to track users as they move across different multimedia channels. But there's some issues there, particularly around the data of the users and who owns that and how it's used. As well, at the literature review, I also discussed this topic of isomorphism. So the idea that universities want to stand out from each other, and yet they also want to feel and look like a university, which means they all look similar to each other, but a little bit different. So yeah, it becomes a bit of an uncanny valley for the university sector. And there's of course issues around advertising effectiveness, which is true for any sector. So that was marketing, comms, and brand practice. There's also digital creative practice, which is pretty essential to the role that I do as well. So this is an emerging field. It's about the production of digital content. So it's quite diverse as well. So these creative practitioners can be filmmakers, script writers, journalists, public relations experts. There's also the digital and information technology component of ICT management, for example. So these creative practitioners come from the creative industries, and they can be embedded into other sectors, such as higher education, which explains my role and how I came to be here. What I like about digital creative practice is that this role and these practitioners are considered as being at the heart of the organization where the action takes place, which is fantastic. However, from my experience, I've found that it's not quite as clear-cut as that, and there can be plenty of barriers that can prevent you from actually just applying digital creative practice effectively in the workplace. So my solution to that has been to apply third space professionalism inside higher education. So this is a hybrid approach. It's about bridging the gap between academia and professionalism in the campus. And these are the kinds of roles you might be familiar with: learning technologists, learning designers, as well as business development managers. So these practitioners, according to the literature review, particularly the work of Whitchurch, identifies these practitioners as being cross-boundary spanning, working vertically and horizontally across the organization, using different mindsets, and emphasis on collaboration with other people, regardless of what their job title or where they're placed in the organization. It's suggested by Whitchurch that third space can help to support creativity. It's also clear to me from looking at the literature review that third space provides a guide for professional staff to help them navigate a contested space for professionals where sometimes you can feel like a second-class citizen alongside academics, which is the focus of the higher education sector. So there's lots of benefits to third space. However, in looking at the literature, I identified a gap in the detail around the act of creativity and the creative process inside higher education. The focus has been on those other roles I mentioned. So I looked to fill that gap through my Doctor of Creative Industries research. So that's my three professions, fields of practice that have influenced my role. So those have influenced my research project. So I went about approaching the research with a particular aim. So my aim was to address the gap in the current third space literature and professional creative practice literature by developing a new evidence-based guidance model, including a set of working practices and processes that guide practitioners in the emergent field of university-cited creative digital marketing practice. That is a creative third space. So that was my aim. So the aim then influenced my research question. So my research question was, what principles and practices might creative digital marketing practitioners who are embedded within a higher education context adopt to enable them to build effective professional relationships and optimize creative outcomes? So that was my research question that set me forth. So from my research question, I then developed 4 objectives. The first objective was about assessing through the literature review the 3 fields of practice and looking at their benefits and limitations to the work I do and what I wanted to achieve. My second objective was working out what was good practice in the industry. So I selected the context of Australia and competitive higher education universities here. I did that by interviewing university marketing directors and then coding their information and then analysing 2 media texts as well. My next objective was to then combine this and look at and modify this information in order to generate a process model or a set of principles that I could then work with in practice. That was that objective, and my final objective was to apply this provisional process model, framework, system, anything that I had worked out from my project 1 in practice in project 2, and test it for its efficacy and reflect on it. So that was we had the research, aim, question, and objectives. That then led to the development of my methodology that I applied in my research. So as you can see from the multifaceted kinds of objectives I had, that necessitated a flexible methodological approach. So what I found was MMR, mixed methodology research design, was an appropriate fit for my project. So what was appropriate about MMR is that it's a hybrid framework that allows you to mix methodologies within a single project. It favors both personal perspectives as well as empirical data inside the same project as well to be balanced equally. So through this process, I synthesized both qualitative and quantitative information and also produced a creative digital artifact and presented my thesis as a creative advertising portfolio. So with the MMR structure in place, that then led to the design of my 2 projects, projects 1 and 2. So in project 1, I did interviews. So semi-structured interviews with the Australian university marketing directors. Along with doing that, I also did a hermeneutical analysis of 2 exemplary media texts drawn from those case studies. That information was then synthesized, and then that contributed, that process model which I then developed, then contributed to project 2 and the practice-led research I applied in practice, which was framed around a participatory communication cycle, but also informed by what I had learned from project 1. Along with doing practice-led research, I also did an autoethnographic narrative, which shadowed the work that I did, and it created a safe space by which I could reflect upon my practice, and in my narrative, I focus on third space moments that occur, which I considered as not being picked up. So in project 1, I did an analysis of good practice. So these are the 4 university marketing directors I interviewed. So it was a semi-structured interview process where I started with broad questions and became increasingly more specific, asking them about their daily practice and then getting to how do you make a good story for a university. That was an hour and a half face-to-face with each 4 of the marketing directors in their place of work. I then took that information and coded it. using in vivo. The bottom two experts, Angelo from WSU and Joanna Lowe from University of Sydney, some creative content, multimodal content that they had created as part of integrated marketing communication campaigns for their universities. I analysed those as well using the interpretive process of hermeneutics. So this is the coding process I applied. I took words that they said that I could see as being relevant to my practice, and then I looked for connections between them. Hey, it's happened. Clint says stop pressing. So I'll just keep talking anyway. So we've got the model of practice, and from this we're going to see 6 themes. So these 6 themes that were generated from the model, just let me know, Clint. So when the 6 themes that were generated from the model, the first one was customer engagement and experience. Another theme that came out was digital creative practice. Another theme that came out, hey, thank you. I would have kept going anyway, it's all right. Customer engagement, interaction, and experience. Yep, it's still happening. Marketing, communications, and brand practice. Governance and administration. Digital creative practice. I think I'm going to click it here now. Brand architecture, design, and understanding customers and context. So these are the 6 themes that emerged, and here's some quick critical insights from each of them. So for customer engagement, that's where you distribute the content to the user, and you want them to have some form of emotional reaction or engagement. This is what the marketing directors were talking to me about during the interviews. The marketing directors also talked about the importance of the marketing and communications process within the university. Marketing staff working together, collaborating, and everyone working as part of an enterprise approach. For governance and administration, it's really important to understand the underlying sort of ecosystem, the documented policies, as well as the culture of the university and the leadership and how the different faculties and research centres operate. So that could be both informal and formal documentation. So digital creative practice. So this, the literature review and the interviews show the variety of different forms of media that can be produced. And it's important for this digital artifacts to represent the universal truth, principles, and values of the organization and the user. It should resonate with them through the content that's produced. Brand architecture, that's the process of the look and feel of the brand, as well as the organizing principles and values that inform how the brand operates. And finally, understanding customers, absolutely critical theme, and that's derived from marketing, qualitative and quantitative information, and it can include large, abstract, broad ideas, as well as specific individual perspectives. We're interested in all of it. So that's the 6 themes. So it was great that there were 6 themes, but as a creative digital marketing practitioner, I was looking for a logical process that I could apply in my own practice. I needed to be practical. So I looked for connections between the different themes, and from that I developed the creative digital marketing process model. So a lot of it will look similar wording to the themes. There are some additions. For example, I've included professional third space practice as part of the model. And importantly, you can see that there's a suggestion of a cycle. So it's not just pick and choose whatever you want. However, you can enter the phases at different points, and you can move between them in different ways. But I wanted the connection there to show that it's a step-based process that people could follow. Based on the interviews and the literature review, it was quite clear to me that the understanding phase should be the beginning, I felt, for this model. And that information then informs the governance phase. Hopefully the university leadership is informed by the understanding phase, as well as both understanding and governance informs the brand architecture and design phase. And we've got the application of that in marketing communication phase, digital creative practice phase. That then goes out to the marketplace for customer interactions, which you then learn more about through understanding. Right, so on top of interviewing the 4 marketing directors, I also looked at 2 exemplary media texts. So the first was Dang a Dut's story. for Western Sydney University. So this is a story of about a hero who is dragged unwillingly into conflict and then has to overcome adversity, and in doing so, discovers what they're capable of and has a transformative journey. And as part of the journey, the university acts as the backdrop to his experience, supporting him. But so this uses a classic storytelling structure where we see Dang have that moment, but importantly, he goes through magical realism. He goes back to where he came from and sees his mother. So it's got this sense of authenticity to it, and yet it's also fake, but it feels real. So there's a lot there to unpack and learn from in terms of digital creative practice. Second text I looked at was Project Here. So similar to the first one, it uses a storytelling structure, except this was a different hybrid approach, which is non-plot based and ethereal, dreamlike, and extensive use of multimodal technology. Cinematic virtual reality wrapped around the user. They can pause the story and then look and click through and then pick up and continue the story via a website experience. So that was really useful, seeing those two examples and seeing the different ways that brand story can be applied in practice. So that information then resulted in the synthesis of the process model, the prototyping version of it, which I then applied in Project 2 in my place of practice here at QUT. So as part of Project 2, my goals were to produce content with other creatives that achieved an outcome for the university. Together we created 2 episodes of a cinematic virtual reality story called Journey to Ours. We also created a cinematic virtual reality story called Kaleidoscope, and we made it, and that was also embedded into a website. We designed the website with lots of multimodal technology as part of it, and also as part of an integrated marketing communications campaign. Along with that, I also did an autoethnographic narrative during Project 2. I got to express myself and pick up on third space professional moments that occurred. So Project 2, when I started Project 2, I had my professional brief as well, alongside what I was meant to do in academia, but the business, the organization wanted me to do things as well. So some of those things included promoting both the faculty brand, as well as the 3 schools, as well as the QUT master brand. So a bit of a balancing act there. Of course, we want to raise the awareness about our creative industries faculty degrees, and we want to highlight the fact that we're a highly innovative, creative organization. There was also a heavy focus on the end-of-year graduate showcase. As you can see, the building here, it was an $88 million building that had just been opened, and it made a great space in which to present build an entire integrated marketing communications campaign around. And I also wanted to produce lots of multimodal content to engage people and experiment in that way. So those are my professional considerations. There's also one other major consideration, which was the development and deployment of a new branding content for the faculty. So I knew that was coming out in the year, but I didn't know when, and so I kept that in the back of my mind. So I applied the process model. I began by moving between the understanding phase and governance, and you're constantly moving back and forth sometimes. And so I investigated the information as suggested by the literature review and the interviewees, gathered stakeholder information, and importantly, I approached academic leaders, particularly 3 school leaders, to find out what their motivations, goals, and values and documented ideals for their school. I also looked to align documentation from QUT with the goals of the faculty, the local area. I then moved into brand architecture and strategy phase. You don't always get an opportunity to actually tinker with the brand architecture in a university, but the creative industries faculty was in an embryonic state at the time, so there was opportunities to do that. So from those understandings I gained, I put together 4 values for the faculty: transformative, experimental, courageous, and environmentally aware. I went to the executive dean and asked her what she felt about it. We talked it through, and she added a 5th one, socially conscious. And from that, I developed a 1-page brand on a page, that came directly from one of the case studies suggesting that's what you should do. So that's what it looked like, and it was about aligning the university brand with information about the faculty, and importantly, this was invaluable for me later on during the year. So during the marketing communications and brand practice phase, that was about working with the university's marketing consultant. I also had a major integrated marketing and communication campaign to promote the Kaleidoscope end-of-year graduate festival, which took place in the major precinct. There was also lots of day-to-day stuff to do, planning, meeting, doing work. Working with the faculty marketing consultant. I also formed and created a multifunctional creative team to work with me on specific creative content. And that was definitely a third space approach. So I collaborated with these creative professionals. They're a mix of academics and pure professionals working outside of the university. And I consider them to be co-creatives who worked with me on my content. I'm very appreciative of their contribution. So we worked on a variety of content throughout the year. The particular focus was on cinematic virtual reality stories. We applied both industry practice as well as information from the Project One. It was a hybrid structure where we applied user design techniques where we could, as well as storytelling structures that were either the hybrid approach or elements of the hero's journey. We looked to do a mix. So I tried to document the creative process as much as I could, recording and meetings and taking photos of the action as it occurred. There's a key moment up there in the top left. So that's Cody Jarrett, a producer academic who worked with us. And just the explanation of us working together on storytelling structure. So this is the first CVR we produced together, Journey to Ours, episode 1. So it tells the story of Jacob Watton. It starts here in the cube actually, and it's a hybrid approach in terms of placing him as the hero, but also having that etheric, dreamlike nature to the content as well, as we saw for Project here. And I wanted to strengthen the identity of the brand in the user with what they were experiencing inside this wraparound content. And I wanted to show the user that creativity and technology and immersion that the faculty provided, rather than focus on conflict or specifically about space, like this is what our campus looks like. No, I want to know about the character and the action and what occurred. So we also produced Journey to Ours episode 2, very similar, same process, but more focus on space and the surrounding Brisbane and the surrounding areas. So we actually start the story in the Eka fairground and also include the Robotronica Festival. The third episode, I traveled to Ars Electronica Festival in Austria, and the files were deleted due to a bad transfer. So that really threw me off. I was like, I had this great plan. I was trying to imagine what my presentation, for my Doctor of Creative Industries would be. I went back to the brand values document after this occurred, and I went, wait a second, the faculty story is more than just an individual. The document suggested to me that to broaden my scope, which is what I did. So by broadening my scope, we made the Kaleidoscope story. So we took the content from Jacob Watton's story and combined it. We produced some new content involving Jesse Hughes and Charmaine Mifsud from journalism, and combined them together. This also gave me an opportunity to embed the Kaleidoscope concept, which was the concept that was emerging for the faculty, our end-of-year graduate showcase. So the title of the story and the characters and the setting and the motivations and messaging aligned with the faculty's end-of-year graduate showcase. That was my goal, and that was the opportunity presented to me by the files being deleted. So that resulted as well in the website I co-created with a web developer, Rory Cartwright, and the cinematic virtual reality story was embedded at the top of the website, as well as many other forms of multimodal technology. So the idea being, we're not telling you about how creative and technology intense and innovative we are at Creative Industries. It's a series of proof points That's what the literature review and the interviewees kept telling me about. Proof points, proving to your audience who you are. And that can be done through creative content. So that was the content we produced. And in terms of the impact it had on people, so we distributed the episode on, first episode on Facebook, so 2,700 views, 43 likes. We also deployed the CVR story at a QUT Open Day, in which we were a part of the Creative Industries faculty booth, and as people came by, we gave them the headgear experience. And it was pretty much every single person who put the headgear on stayed for the entire story, and when they took it off, we were taking notes. The most common word was just wow, and they just had a big open-eyed, faraway look as they'd fully been immersed in the story and really enjoyed it. So we got really good feedback. Also, the cinematic virtual reality story that was created has been in use for years on the QUT website as one of about 5 virtual reality showcases. So in terms of use and impact, it's found plenty of value moving forward. Episode 2, we tested via the Google Cardboard experience at Robotronica. We also placed it on Facebook, where it got 4,000 views and 14 likes. The Kaleidoscope story, we distributed that as part of the Integrated Marketing Communications campaign, which include emails, brochures, print, and pop-up banners at the locations during the festival. That drove traffic to the website, where I showed earlier. And we can see 5,271 unique users. And you can see from the thick blue line there that it's sort of like double the amount of traffic we'd received the prior year, plus a larger spike towards the end there showing the end of year graduate showcase where people were coming to the website. So that was the end of the 6 phases I applied. I also said I did an autoethnographic narrative. So that, as I said earlier, that created a safe space for me to express myself and pick out these key moments I felt weren't being picked up through the practice-led process. So some of my key takeaways from that. The university environment is messy, dynamic, there's lots going on. And what happens is that this then disrupts the creative practice process. So this could occur through internal barriers as well as external challenges. So in order to get around this, continual work and resilience is required in order to create creative content. So you have to do that. The way to do that is to maintain relationships and to build momentum and collaborate with other people. You can collaborate with other people through this concept called the content development trading zones. So I took that concept from Third Space, which has the idea of trading zones where people are working together informally. And the idea is that I can work with you on content, I can be a part of your content or help support yours, and you might be able to give me access to a unit or a particular topic. And I can just see the way in which content can be the way in which people engage with each other across the university. Right, so coming to my conclusions now. I've had a number of different outcomes from my Doctor of Creative Industries thesis and the research work that I did. First was the original works of creative digital artifacts that were created. And I've talked about the impact on the user, the meaningfulness of this content on those involved, as well as the value back to the university. Now, the second outcome was clearly the creative digital marketing process model. So it's a new rigorous model that's been tested in practice, and it has the 6 phases as well as works alongside the principles of practice. So this is there to guide creative digital marketing practitioners such as myself in the way in which they go about doing their work. So alongside the model, I also have 6 principles of practice. So these can be used at any point of the phase, whichever phase you're in. These are universal rules I discovered are really important. First is understanding stakeholders and the way in which they operate. In order to develop an authentic brand story, you can't just sit on your own and create it. You've got to understand other people. Align your story with both the faculty and the university's brand values and their vision. Easy to say, but I've found a lot in creative process that it can get lost. So what I actually did was have that brand document there with me as a reference and a guide throughout that process. You need to collaborate within and across organizational boundaries. And I also suggest the idea of the content development trading zones and a way in which to do that. It's really critical to apply digital user-oriented design principles as well as those storytelling structures. They work well together. That's the way they should be used. In doing all this, you have to be prepared to take creative risks if you want to achieve results. And be willing to embrace new technologies. And in terms of the way you conduct yourself, you've got to be adaptive, resilient, and flexible. And you have to be willing to face a dynamic, changing work environment. So that's 6 principles of practice to go with my process model. And another outcome is the concept of the creative third space. So that is a combination of what I've already explained, as well as a contribution to third space professional literature, contributing to third space to make a creative third space, which included my study into the day-to-day work of creative digital marketing professionals working within a university context, as well as the process model and the principles, all contributing to the larger idea of what happens in the university. And what I've done is also an original contribution to professional creative practice literature and practice-led research. So yeah, thank you. That's my Doctor of Creative Industries Faculty Research Seminar. Thank you so much for attending. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Thank you.
Great work, James. Now we get to interrogate you. Is it not quite true? We get to have a conversation.
Let's talk about creativity.
That's right.
Yeah, let's do it.
I've got like 1,000 questions. We're going to start with the audience. Who wants to go first? Do you want to kick off? Or we've got someone in the audience who might want to...
I can kick off.
Yeah, can you kick off?
It's really interesting. I just, what if you maybe dive down into one of the 6 principles, which I think was number 4, about user-centered design and narrative structures. I wondered if you could just give us one example of how that principle manifested itself in what you were doing with user-centered design, going through to having a narrative structure in the ground. Because I think that's quite distinctive.
Yes. Yep. So you can see that in the effect framework by Wrigley and I forget the other name. So what they've created is they point out that moment of interaction. So there's a connection between the moment of interaction via technology and a behavior change, but in between is emotion. So in terms of the cinematic virtual reality stories I created, there was no interactivity within it. But what I did do was take the cinematic story and place it within the context of the website. So it was the combination of that, and you were able to also, like I had a social media feed. You could see in that feed where people are producing content. That's all part of like an informal brand storytelling. And they can click through and it will change which location they click on will change the content that's being shown. So that's like a design technique used to, so that's less informal. There's a project here, the interaction in that example is probably a really good one because the user is actually pausing the story and then looking around and selecting other items. They're having moments, going, and they're spending as much time as they want, pondering, thinking, reflecting. They do whatever they want. They go back to the story and press play. So yeah, that's the interactivity in innovating the storytelling process. Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah, go.
Hank, hello.
It's interesting, thanks, James. You know, when you talk about third space, you're talking about quite a specific context, which do you think is transferable to other third space?
I hope so. That would be my hope that some of the principles and ideas and the ways of working can contribute to the larger third space concept. I think so. There's a lot of overlap. But for me, it always has to go back to content. and I'm really interested in that creative process and adding in multimedia modal technology. So I've got those few extra things there that other third space practitioners aren't as concerned about. They've got other concerns which may not involve technology, it might be other things. So yeah, there's ways in which we can support each other, of course. Yeah. Thanks, Hank.
Your positionality in this project is very much as a creative practitioner.
Yes.
And I'm interested, especially in the order of ethnographic narratives, and talk about, and you talk about this in your principles, about the need for the practitioner to be resilient and agile. I guess what I'm interested in is also what did you learn about, what is it that enables a third space practitioner to thrive in higher education? Because you talked a lot about potential and contestations, but you also learned from your work about what it is that will enable those practitioners to have an impact, have momentum.
Yeah, so I think we're all sick of the word resilience, right? So, but those kind of things, resilience, adaptiveness, flexibility, but those are commonalities of third space as well as the production of creative content. What helped me was this sort of internal drive to want to create something that would have an impact and influence on other people through content. So that was my personal motivation. So for me, I'm coming into third space, looking for third space to help me. And the way in which I was introduced to it was actually the way I work. My manager said to me one day, you know what, I think you might be interested in third space. I went, oh, okay. This was in 2013, so the year the article came out. And I read it and went, wow, this is the way I work. So they could see that in me, and then I could see that in third space. So yeah, it's kind of happened naturally, I guess, the way that I operate. And a lot of them are those characteristics of flexibility, agility. Whether there's any other little bits and pieces, I don't know. That's why I've gone back to focusing on the content as the mechanism by which to engage with others, which is the unique aspect of creative third space and the creative process. Creative process is a great way in which to work with people. Everyone's bringing different skills. They have access to different areas in the university. So it's just like time and organizational barriers and positional authority which prevent that from occurring. So you have to find all the different ways around that. By being resilient, being motivated, and putting yourself out there. Yeah. Thank you.
More?
Any online questions? No? No Twitter questions? Any last chance?
I mean, I've got a couple of questions. So firstly, I always like to ask students what surprised them most in their research journey. Like, so the whole point of the DCI is to turn a critical eye onto your professional practice. And I'm just wondering kind of what surprised you and how have you changed?
Oh yeah, I think you'll like my answer.
Okay, good.
So I talked about I talked about integrated crystallization and synthesis. Oh my goodness, that was just such a cool experience when you have this academic structure telling you what to do, and then you've got this messiness of the professional situation occurring. And then to have that structure there was really beneficial. That surprised me about how much that can actually support professionalism. And then doing all that work, and then that moment of synthesis of the data, looking at it from different perspectives and situations, and seeing it flow through you. That was really cool, because I had read about it, but I didn't know about it until I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how have you changed how you approach your job or role? As a result?
No, that's a really good one, because it's about my relationship to the creative process and creativity in the university. How much going forward am I going to be as hands-on with content as I have been? I've been really intense about it for a decade. Will I continue to do that moving forward, or will I move into less hands-on roles? That's a little bit scary, actually, because it's the hands-on production of content which keeps you in touch with your techniques. So in a university, it's very easy to be split off, and then you become focused on a particular role. So I think, it'll be interesting. I've been observing myself the last couple of years, like the work I did here, and then how it relates to a change in situation, and what does that mean? I'm keeping that in mind, and it'll be an ongoing journey. But yes, I'd love to always stay in contact with creativity and the hands-on production of content.
Okay, any final questions? Yep.
Let's take that one step further. If you were going to take a principle from now,
Yes.
and you were going to shift one thing of the approach that you've used there, what one thing would you shift?
Oh. The one thing I would shift in any university in which you're operating, was 100% it's got to be, there's a couple of them. Just going back to collaboration, the process in which that occurs is huge. What is the culture in which we can engage and talk to other people? There's so many blockers and barriers based on organizational structure and positional authority which prevent professionals and creative practitioners from getting on with the job of being creative. If there was a way in which to change that, and actually I did have one idea for that. At QUT we have an innovation flag for units which are doing something innovative.
Correct.
Why can't we have an innovation flag for professionals or something similar that creates a safe pocket where they can say, I'm doing this work because it's meaningful to me and it's 10% of my work and it's a creative, it's a protective zone to allow them to be creative. So things like that, ideas like that and innovation roadshows are happening in the industry. So things like that, if we brought them into the higher education sector, that would be great.
I mean, we had the privilege of reading your documents, we were on the panel, and it did strike me that you didn't really reflect very much on the challenges and detail of working with academics and different professionals, and I'm just wondering, was that a conscious choice not to dive deep into that?
Yeah, there was lots there to say, and we can talk about the problems.
Yeah.
Without necessarily having to go into the exact examples. So literature review talked in detail about
No,
that.
I'm talking about your study.
My
Like,
auto.
Yeah,
so
the autoethnographic piece. I'm just wondering,
Yeah. I tried to touch on it. I definitely have sections in there where I talk about there's conflict and tension between myself and my supervisor and other professionals around me. There was discussions about roles and responsibilities. I could easily have elaborated more, and I still can if you want me to.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering, because that ties into the point that your question you're asking is that this is a professional practice thesis.
Yeah.
How do we change and improve professional practice? And part of that is relationships, it's content, it's branding, it's all of those. It's decision making, I guess.
And prioritization is huge.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time we can want to do a lot of things and not prioritize.
That's 1,000%.
So as staff, we're going, hold on, but you just said 3 different priorities. Which one do you want me to focus on? So that gets lost a bit in leadership as well.
Yeah, what does success look like for creative, I always get the exact, creative, whatever you call it, creative digital marketing person?
Practice, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things I find really interesting is, and I've watched QT, is we're going around an increasingly centralized brand.
Yeah.
So one of my questions would be, what's the value of a centralized brand, but also what impact does that then have on digital creative practice?
Yeah, so I think universities, as you know, shift between moving to decentralized to centralized. Each one has their own benefits, and so obviously we moved to centralized because there's cost benefits. So that's more of a neoliberal managerial thinking. So if you decentralize it, you can allow pockets of innovation to occur, like the way that I've come into the university. But as you saw, it could actually get a little bit rogue sometimes if the faculties and the research centers go off and do their own things. That's a negative. That requires those professionals to work with.
Is that a negative? But let's.
Well,
yes, it is.
I said I've got multiple hats, right? So I'm saying
I know. I put on my senior director hat.
I'll put on my marketing communications and brand practice hat and say, yes, it's an issue because we have to be connected together. So that's why I keep saying that. But also the digital creative practitioner and the third space professional person's like, get out there and do whatever you want. So that's why I've combined.
And so that's the tension that we're trying to get at, and what is the best for the university brand. So say we're QUT, right? But if we were RMIT, they've got a very different brand. And I'm just wondering how that plays out, and if you were the boss of QUT, where would you go?
Where would I go? Where would I start from?
Understanding
phase, I would learn the stakeholders, and then I move into the governance phase. I would then help develop a system for a marketing communication strategy. From that information, I would then apply it by working collaboratively with professionals across the organization through a co-creative process, which was meaningful to those involved as well as the people who receive the information, because we're making sure it's meaningful and not thrown off by red tape and organizational structure. And we're constantly focused on that. We're getting the content to the people. Yes,
that's a very good answer.
Although it's interesting because QUT was moving towards third space roles significantly.
Yeah.
And now it seems to have flipped completely back to there's an academic role and a professional role, and I'm seeing a very basically the erasure of third space at QT.
Yeah, well, hopefully this is a contribution. I haven't given up on third space. Yeah, so.
We've probably grilled you and been controversial enough. So is there any, yep, some online questions?
Yes, Emily. Oh, yes.
Bunny Cooper was sitting here before in the audience. She
Yep.
put a tweet up. How would you feel about sharing, recording your story of disaster into opportunity for QT well-being? She found that very inspiring.
Yeah, 100%. And that, someone asked about reoccurring themes. So yeah, hitting rock bottom and then climbing back up again. And guess what? It's just a silly little one-page brand document. But I did it, and then it was there, and I went, wait a second, I looked at it, I went, so yeah, the support mechanism's there to help you out if you get into trouble. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. I've really appreciated your time and effort. Have a good day.
Wait, yeah. We've got to say thank you to you. Yeah, good job. We say thank you, well done, good job,
Well done.
well done. Now we must have a room somewhere, do we? I hope.
Yes. Is there one book?